Welcome to The Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn, where purpose meets performance and leaders are built to shift legacies. I'm Dr. Sharalyn Payne, executive strategist, speaker, and the secret weapon behind leaders who drive transformation at the highest levels. Each episode delivers bold truths, power skills, and real-world strategies to help you lead with precision, show up with presence, and build the kind of influence that outlasts trends. This is the space where high-impact decisions are born, where influence is intentional, and where the bold don't just lead, they change the game. So if you're ready to rise, ready to lead, and ready to create the kind of impact that moves markets, missions, and minds, you're in the right place. Welcome, Game Changers. I am thrilled to have a fascinating leader with us here today. And I'm going to let her introduce herself, but let me just tell you why you need to listen. You need to listen because she is going to talk to us about something that we all face in our everyday lives. And for many of us, we don't really know what to do, how to do it, how to navigate through it, and we make it much bigger than it is. And I truly believe that it leads to us self-sabotaging. I really believe that. We get in our own way. And so she's going to be speaking to us about conflict and problem solving and communication. Don't you just love it? I am absolutely sitting on the edge of my seat, literally, because I have read her background. When I tell you this is a powerful young woman, she's truly a game changer in every sense of the word. I just thought of the title Game Changer, but she is that game changer. So she's going to be here with us today, and she's going to be sharing with us some game-changing principles and insights we can use to totally transform our lives. Again, we deal with conflict, we deal with communication, we are leaders, whether you have the title or not. And so the information that she's going to be sharing with us today is truly insightful. With that, I welcome Leah Brown. Leah, so glad to have you here.
Oh, Sharalyn, thank you so much for having me. It is a joy to be here.
Thank you so much. Let's get into it. Let's just jump in. Why don't you tell us about who you are, how you actually help people in the work that you do?
Yes, of course. So I am the founder and CEO of an organization called the Wayfinders Group. I have the privilege of helping people rebuild trust when things get political or when egos get out of hand. And I help leaders navigate the organizational dynamics, whether that's dysfunction or whether that is communication breakdowns that destroy organizations. So those impossible personalities, dealing with those boardroom battles and culture clashes that everyone knows about because you can't hide when those sorts of things are happening around you.
No, you cannot hide. And so it always shows up. People can feel it. They see it, they hear it, they talk about it. You hear the whispers. So, what advice would you give to someone who is challenged with that? And maybe perhaps they've engaged in some type of organizational dynamic and people are whispering about them, how they handle that situation?
Yeah, it makes me think of those situations, when you're in high school and there's a bunch of girls in the corner that are like mean girls who are talking about you behind your back. And the one thing you're never going to do is go over to all four or five girls and confront them, right? I think, people are much less confident and much less likely to be challenging if you have them one-on-one. So the first thing is to have private conversations behind closed doors with individuals. The second thing is always lead with curiosity. I don't know why they would be having those conversations about you or behind your back or whatever. Maybe they're bored. Maybe it's a slow news day. But ultimately, if you start with curiosity, you'll be disarming whatever it is that they think that they might have against you or on you, because you can say, I found it really interesting. I've heard that somebody has said this. Why do you think that? I'm really interested because, I really take feedback seriously, and I'd just love to know why you hold that perspective. And even though you might be offended or even though you might be affronted, I think by leading with curiosity, you give them an opportunity, first of all, to separate themselves from whatever it is said, to apologize for whatever it is that has been said, and also to see if you can rebuild a relationship with them because they will be feeling guilt. No matter what they've said, they will be feeling guilt. And so I think it just levels the playing field. And then obviously the next step beyond that curiosity is get to the root of the problem. But I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit later.
Absolutely. Now, how did you get into this work? That's what I should have asked that question first, but what you said before led me to ask the first question. But I really want to know, how did you get involved in this work, and how did you know that this was your passion?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So, as with all founders, I think you really need to know why you're doing something. And for me, I was really clear on what it was that I was doing, but I've been kind of disconnected from my why. I think one of the things I've been exploring is I have a real heart for healing. I have a real heart for repair and reconciliation and fixing things. And I really think that comes from a childhood of chaos and conflict and dysfunction where there was no opportunity for repair, where the apologies didn't come, where the acknowledgement didn't come, where no amends came. And so it's really propelled me into the what if we could do things differently, and how much more would we benefit, not just as a workplace or as a community, but just as individuals, if we had greater literacy on how to move beyond conflict, what happens after the explosion. And so I was working as a lawyer in a general counsel role, leading the legal function of a fintech business. And we were in a really sticky situation. I also sat on the board as company secretary. And it was the pandemic, and there weren't that many acquisition opportunities, but we were determined we were going to pursue one. And in that whole situation, the evolution of how that transaction came about and how we were going to get it done, the nervousness of the board about the situation caused all kinds of interpersonal conflicts, because in conflict, we don't come to the table as the adult version of ourselves. We revert to that inner child version of ourselves for how we first learned to engage with conflict, whatever our style is, whether that is anxiety about it, avoidance, push it onto somebody else, denial, pretending it's not happening. And I was dealing with all of these different dynamics whilst trying to keep my eye on the ball and say, guys, we've got this. It's going to be fine. Let's keep moving in the same direction. And I was like, we've got to find a way to rebuild these relationships when these situations, these fault lines disrupt the balance of things, and an ordinarily otherwise functional board suddenly starts to crumble under pressure. And I was like, there's got to be a way through this. Now, there was a way through this, and there were a lot of conversations offline, and there was a lot of kind of soul searching and creating a space where these directors could be vulnerable. But I think for me, it really propelled me into whether or not other people value it or not. This is what I've been created to do, to restore these relationships, to understand how people show up in conflict, to help them navigate through it, figure out what they want, what's important to them, and what they can just let go of. And oh, it's such an exhilarating roller coaster. But I've found it to be a really exciting path. And part of that is I formally trained as a mediator. And so I spend as much time mediating as I do using the skills that a mediator uses to help empower executives to achieve their organization's mission.
I love that you share that story with us. And you actually answer my next question, which was, how did you learn the skills to do this? And so training as a mediator, so that makes sense. It kind of goes hand in hand. What was the most powerful thing you took from that experience when you were training as a mediator?
Do you know, I think when I started training, so mediators in England, you do a 40-hour accredited mediation training course where you go through, it's kind of like a university intensive. And then you're kind of not let loose. You then have to do a series of shadowing and observations and immersing yourself in other processes. And then you can work with other more experienced mediators, and then you can kind of go out and build your own practice. And for me, I think the first day on my training course, I was like, this is what I was born to do. Now, for those who know me, you will know that before I became a corporate mergers and acquisitions lawyer, I was training to be a barrister, and I was very excited about being an advocate, one of the ones who wears the wig and the gown and who goes up before the judges in court and advocates for my client's best interests. And long story short, because of my immigration challenges in the UK at the time, I didn't have the right status to be able to progress my career. And so I went into a law firm that enabled me to have a sponsored visa. And I promised myself that I wouldn't look back. And I didn't. I don't regret that decision at all, because getting qualified and growing and increasing my personal development and potentially reaching an opportunity to have impact was absolutely the right decision for me. But everything about the advocacy and the self-employment and the ways in which you pass through life and how you help people and those communication skills and that ability to express yourself eloquently and consistently and in any forum with any type of person meant that I was much more suited to that career than the one I ultimately ended up taking. And so that first day in that mediation course where I was like, oh, finally, something that recognizes the fullness of the skills that I bring to the table in a very different discipline where listening is the greatest priority and doing no harm is the framework upon which we operate. And I thought, okay, now within that, what am I called to do?
I love that. That's absolutely amazing. With that, you said something that was so powerful, and I don't even know if you caught it. You may have, but for me, you decided not to look back. You decided not to look back. How did you come to that realization? We're going to get into the conflict and everything else, but I think it's so important because leaders, and even when you're having conflict with people, right? You regret what you said, you regret what you did, and it can keep us stuck. So, how did you come to the realization that I'm not going to look back?
I feel like I'm the best at the pivot. I really envy people who have had, a nice linear progression towards whatever it is that they're doing. That has just not been my experience. And I think for me, I recognized when I had an opportunity to do something, but I recognized that if I was going to make the most of that opportunity, I needed to not wish I was somewhere else. And
That's
it's
good.
ironic to me that I recognized the need to be present when actually I don't think I had the capacity to be present. I talked about those early life circumstances and a lot of the challenges that we experience in childhood, whether they're adverse child experiences or whatever, they tend to show up around your mid-20s.
Right?
Just when your career's starting to get going and when you think you know yourself, and then it kind of blindsides you and it's like, oh, no, 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 we have some things we need to work on. And it was in that process of saying, okay, well, I'm going to say I'm not going to look back, because the reality is I was going to be defeated by disappointment. I
Mhm.
don't do well with disappointment. I'm much better now than I was in the past, because I see that now as a redirection. I recognize that, I'm being shepherded, I'm being guided, and I have to be open to no's. But back then, I think the disappointment of having put my all into a career that I was desperate to have, and quite frankly, had made a significant financial sacrifice to even pursue. I said, okay, I have to draw a line under this, otherwise it will break me. And I've tried, and it was not possible. So I'm not going to spend the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years of my life regretting this decision. And I think now, looking back on it, I think we as leaders really have to give ourselves permission to make the best decision that we're able to make with the information we have available to us at the time. And if we get an opportunity, where this is very Maya Angelou, but if we get an opportunity to do better later, then do better later. But in the intervening period, just let it go.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing that you look so young. I don't know your age, but you look absolutely like a baby. And that's a good thing because I'm working on that every day.
I'm 38, so I am definitely old enough to buy ibuprofen and paracetamol in the supermarket, although I get ID'd every single time.
See, that's what I need. I need to get ID'd and I need to start asking them, please ID me, like passing them aside. But with that, it's amazing. I just love seeing people who are so wise. And I'm gonna say a sucker for wisdom, right? So anytime I see, just wise people, especially people who are wise beyond their years, it's absolutely inspiring. So speaking of the power of the pivot and being the best at the pivot, let's go ahead and pivot into our conversations on conflict. One of the things that I love that you share was winning is the worst conflict strategy, but we all want to win, and people want to win in arguments, whether it's at work, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's with your family, friends, whatever. I mean, people are always looking to win, especially when conflict is there. So tell me, why is that, in your viewpoint, the worst conflict strategy?
As soon as you're trying to win, you've put yourself into a situation where you succeed if you're right and you fail if you lose, which makes it impossible for both of you to come away from that conversation intact or that situation intact. Now, one of the things I find really interesting is the people who put winning at the forefront of their minds don't stop to consider whether, one, winning is in their best interest, or two, winning
That's
actually gives them what they want. So if I separate a person from the problem and I try to understand, okay, what's going on for you here? Okay, how have you come to be in this situation? Okay, new question. How is this situation affecting those around you? Maybe your husband at home, or maybe your daughter, or maybe your colleague at work. What impact is this situation having on them? Okay, so as you dig into this conversation more and more and more, you quickly find out that the thing motivating them is not anywhere near the thing that they're fighting for. It might be something completely unrelated. And it also might be the fact that nobody's ever asked them what they actually want. It's just on principle, I need to be seen to win, or I've got to be the bigger person, or I've got to have one-upmanship because they got one up over me last time, and I've got to save face. And it's like, look, life is short. We have limited number of days on this earth. We should want to live peaceably. And even if you don't, there is a better way to get what you want than creating a winning or losing construct in conflict. And I think part of it is a lot of people have only learned to communicate that way, where they are right or they are wrong and there is nothing in between. Now, the number one rule in communication is that there must be nuance. So I could be saying something to you right now, and you could be hearing something that I'm saying to you right now. And if I said to you, please repeat back to me what I've just said, you could repeat back to me what you've heard, completely different than I've A, intended to say, B, have actually said, and C, thought that you could possibly construe from what I've said.
Right.
And so before you even get to winning or losing, we haven't even established whether you've got common ground on what the subject matter is, or what the problem is, or what is needed. And so it skips so many steps that it takes you further away from resolution. And that's why winning is the worst possible strategy.
I love that, because one of the things even working with leaders, I've had to ask them, so am I hearing you correctly? Because I think we're speaking about this, and you're actually speaking about something totally, totally different. We may have started down that path, and somewhere someone got lost. And when you're not assessing and checking for understanding and ensuring that we're on the same page, and one of the things I love to share with leaders, we're on the same side. So I'm on your side. I'm not your enemy. I'm not your opponent. I want to see you win. And here's how we can actually do that. And so it's amazing how we go off, off to the races. And we're not even really thinking about, what are we working towards here? Why is this absolutely important? Is this something that is even worth the conversation and the
Yeah.
dialogue? And then the
Yeah.
number of people, and I'm sure you've seen this, who want to be right. And as I share with him, you can be right and you can be by yourself. You can be right and you can be single. You can be right and you have no friends. You can be right, And so you're trying to win, and at what cost?
Do you know, sometimes I ask people, what are you afraid of?
Oh,
Because
that's good.
often the fear is what's driving the winning. The fear both of being in conflict and in also having to face the
Mm.
conflict and in being found out in conflict and in losing the conflict. And so often the best thing to do is to say, okay, what's the worst that can happen here? And really kind of delve down on not just what's driving you, but is it you choosing, like in a sports match, to go for gold, or is the fear what's driving the winning? What's really going on for you? And I think that fear comes from a lot of leaders don't know how to be vulnerable. And I say this as somebody who didn't know how to be vulnerable. And you can think that you are pouring your whole heart out and you're wearing it on your sleeve. You're about as vulnerable as a light post. Okay, it's not working, and that then shows up in conflict because actually your winning strategy is about a defensive posture. It's about saying, if I go for gold, you can't get to me because I'm not giving you anything to potentially use as ammunition against me. Ironically, it's sabotaging the outcome because actually, without that vulnerability and conflict, okay, yes, you would potentially open yourself up to be more wounded, but you also can't heal because they don't know what you're upset about.
That's so good. That's so good. And we hear that all the time is that, don't share, don't let it, never let them see you sweat, never let them know what you're really thinking. And so thank you for sharing that with us. So how do we communicate without making conflict worse? And I know you've already talked to us about being curious, and I love that. So, but how do we communicate without making the conflict worse?
I do love curiosity, but I think it's kind of what we already started to discuss, which is starting by listening to
Mhm.
understand, not to reply.
That's good.
Now, it's really, really tempting. Again, I used to be quite like this. Sometimes when I'm really, really tired, I'm also still like this, where you can hear somebody's train of thought and you're like, oh, I don't want them to get to the end of their train of thought because I really need to take this in a different direction, and you interrupt them. People actually will give themselves away if you give them enough time to get to the end of their thought. So position yourself in a typical executive committee meeting, for example, right? At the type of meeting where you have great ideas and then your coworker steals them and passes them off as their own.
Really?
This is a good way to expose this,
Really?
right? You can use awkward silences in situations of conflict to get people to use the insecurities or the anxieties underneath that situation to show them what it is that they've done wrong, and to bring out that I don't want to say confession, but I suppose recognition that something's amiss here, and maybe that's your responsibility. So I think when it comes to how can you make sure that you're not making your conflict worse, you start by listening. Just give the other person space to express themselves, and in that, be curious, show that you are interested in what they are saying to you. Because the thing is about relationships, unless they're a very specific personality type, they will reciprocate that opportunity to you. And if they don't, they will get 20 minutes into the conversation, be like, oh, I've been talking for so long and I'm so sorry. And I haven't, like, please tell me everything. I'm so interested in blah, 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 blah. Because you've created a situation where you've made them feel seen and heard. And that might have been the first opportunity in days or weeks for them to actually be seen and heard, even if what they're saying is of very little value.
Thank you for that. So I've been picturing some of my own personal relationships. I'm gonna throw this out here. Hopefully she's not listening. So I have a friend, and whenever and she sent me a message this week, and she's like, "We should catch up soon." And I'm like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope. We're not catching up this week. I do not have hours to speak to her because number one, she talks for hours, and it's hard to even get a word in. So when you say hello, she's like off, and there is no bringing her back. And it's 1,000 miles an hour with the words just coming at you. So, how do I, and I've shared a conversation with her, or share my thoughts rather with her about that behavior. So, what would you advise me to do in that sense? Somebody who just never stops. She just does not take the stop in the silence or whatever. She just
Does
love.
that
I'm gonna
only
say she
happen
loves
on phone
conversation.
calls?
Pretty much phone calls because we're not, she doesn't live in the city anymore. So she's living somewhere else.
Okay. So I think this is female friendships often have this dynamic, right, where you've kind of gotten into a pattern of expectations. So there's an expectation here that she will uh, vomit her needs on you, and you will be there to hold them in a bucket. And she may offer you a clean bucket later for you, but probably not. One of the challenges, I think, is that the fear of the confrontation prevents us from addressing the actual issue. I think, does this person share your values? Does this person add to your life? Does this person deserve your time? Um, is this person ever going to change? Because you can only change yourself. You
Absolutely.
can put in boundaries about okay, well, I would only like to have in-person conversations with you, or I would only like to have video calls with you, and I'm only available for half an hour. I do this where I have challenging conversations or don't have capacity to have that 2 hour call, and I will sandwich it in when I definitively have to go to something else. So I'm like, you have to make this quick because I literally have 7 minutes, and then I need 2 minutes to prepare for my next call, and then I will regroup with you later. But I want you to have an opportunity to get whatever it is off your chest. And I have no expectation that that conversation is going to enrich me. It's just I'm a giver in this situation, and I've made peace with that. But when it comes to the confrontation about the behavior itself, you need to decide whether you're ever going to be able to deal with it. Because if the same thing keeps happening and that person won't change, ultimately it's a question for you as to whether or not you walk away. And what that walking away looks like, there's a huge
Right.
scale, right? But I think the challenge is this conflict coming from the fact that I've realized that I'm in a relationship that contravenes my values? One of my values is that I give time to other people and I care for other people. And it's important to me that I treat people as I would like to be treated. And I'm not being treated the way I would like to be treated in this situation. And so actually the underlying issue isn't that the first thing that she does is tell you everything that she's doing. The underlying issue is that you don't feel respected and you don't feel valued. And so it sounds like what's important to you is that you have friends who value you. And so the question is to her, how do you value me? And what could we do to change the balance in this relationship? Because I don't feel valued in the ways that I want to be valued by my friends. That's not the most eloquent phrasing of it, but I guess the issue I'm getting to is you have to address the conflict at the root, not the surface manifestation or the symptom of the issue. And so actually
Mhm.
it's not the phone calls that are the problem, it's that she's not respecting you.
I love that. Thank you for that. I asked that question and I wanted to definitely get your feedback on that as you mentioned the previous point. And so with that, I would absolutely say there's some truth to that. I feel that it's not reciprocal, right? And so
Mhm.
when I can show up for you, are you still showing up? Are you showing up for me? And with that, the respect there of if I've shared, hey, these are some hardcore subjects that I don't want to discuss, and you still step on the boundary and you want to have those type of conversations. Whereas if I've said, hey, I don't want to talk about clients, I'm not talking about the work that I do. That's I just want to have a free flowing, fun conversation. I don't want to hear about your work either because I want it to be free. I don't want to solve problems for 5 hours or 4 hours or discuss negativity and leave with the baggage there. And
Mhm.
so, how can we talk about the more enjoyable things that are going on in our lives? And so, yes, absolutely, that's a truth that's there. So, I love how you share that. So, that's a way that we can conflict, right? We can have communication without making the conflict worse. And so,
Right.
getting to the root of the issue. So, how do we have those difficult conversations that people are avoiding? We all have a conversation in our life that we need to have that we perhaps may be avoiding with whoever, and perhaps it's even yourself. But how do you have the difficult conversations? What advice and guidance would you give there?
Prepare, prepare, prepare. Now, I caveat that because there was a time where every time I had to go into any conversation, I wanted to be prepared. I would run through 20 different scenarios in my head about what that conversation would be like. And, you know, there wasn't a single time where the conversation actually played out like that. So that is not what I mean. What I mean is, so when I grew up, my dad was the king of making lists, and he had a pack of index cards that he'd keep in the inside pocket of his suit jacket. And every day he would write lists out on this index card. Now, the thing about an index card is there's not that much that you can fit on it. So one of the things I find quite helpful is to try and bullet point your thoughts. So to
Hmm.
say, okay, there's a problem. If I could say anything to this person, what would it be? Get that
That's
down on the index card. Okay, great. How can we streamline that and make that more concise? Okay, so what's actually the most important thing that's on this card that I need to communicate? Okay, how should I communicate that? Now, then you get into the more practical question of, does this need to be in an email? Does this need, never an email. Does this need to be a conversation? Does this need to be in person? I always recommend, if you can, conflict resolution in person. If not, a video is the next best thing. It is possible by telephone. I actually do a lot of board mediations by telephone because the executives can take the call on their morning walk and it feels less intimidating, and they can share as much of themselves as they feel comfortable to without looking at you. It's kind of like the advice that they give to couples to say, you know, never argue at a table, you know, sit in the car and have a difficult conversation when you're on the move. Um, but I think when I say prepare, once you've decided what it is that you need to communicate and how you're going to communicate that, there's one more step. How do you think that person's going to respond? Because if you know things about them, where you know that you're immediately going to bring this conversation from 0 to 60 with this one kind of idea that you're communicating, maybe don't start there. And I think a lot of relationships therapists would say the best way to start a conversation is saying, I would like to talk to you about this. So, what is the subject matter that you want to discuss? It's really important to me that you understand how I feel. And so, I'm going to phrase things from the perspective of how I feel. I understand that you might not feel like this, but it's important to me that I communicate to you how I feel. You framed it, you've given them an opportunity to say, I can't have this conversation right now. They might be really busy. Try and choose a convenient time, convenient place, not a meeting right before a meeting so that you both have to run off and you don't get a chance to explore or close that properly. And then I think say what you need to say and then create space. Because they're going to have to process what you've been thinking about for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes
right.
months, sometimes years. Give them space. And if they're struggling to respond, give them permission to say that that's okay. And would they like to reconvene to discuss after they've had a chance to ponder? This has worked really well actually in relationships that I've had with close friends where our relationships have just completely broken down, right? You know, when you're friends with people over 20 years, you change, seasons of life change,
Right.
expectations change, habits, jobs, capacities, families, things change. And you find what worked for you for the last 10 years doesn't work for you anymore. And I've been really grateful to be able to have relationships with friends who will go through that process and say, look, this really isn't working, but here is why. And this is what's going on from my perspective. And then you get an opportunity to come back and say, I had no idea that you felt like that. You can thank them for sharing that with you, or you can ask them why it took them so long to share that with you. But again, that curiosity shows engagement. That's what draws you back together. Because if you're really focused on maintaining the relationship, the one thing you can't do is ignore anything that has been said or try and sweep anything under the rug. And I think that's easier, it's faster, but it doesn't give rise to long lasting relationships where it's okay to disagree and it's okay to have a problem with somebody else. And it's okay to be an individual and an adult and need to walk away from situations and people at times and places. But I think creating that space is the best way that you can de escalate what otherwise could erupt in a way that could irreparably break your situation or your relationship for good.
It's great advice. Does that apply in the workplace, in our work relationship? I see you smiling.
Do you know, I think it does. And it's unpopular to say that. I think the concept of sharing and vulnerability in a workplace makes people feel uncomfortable. I'm personally of the school of thought that workplaces are professional environments where one should bring your professional self to work. And we live in 2025 and things have changed, particularly post-pandemic. I'm amazed at what business dress is these days. Um, but do you know what? Workers are people and people are humans and human relationships, they're the same everywhere in any environment. And therefore, these disciplines of how you communicate, that listening to understand or checking for understanding or clarifying what it is that you think you've understood, they're not just nice to haves. They're necessary, not just for personal growth, but just for stable environments. And I think a lot of businesses are judged for being toxic cultures. But the first problem, if you ask somebody who's in what's deemed a toxic environment, what the issue is, well, nobody's listening to what I'm saying. Hmm. Funny that. So how much of a difference would it make if you, in one conversation, created a space where somebody was listened to and then asked them how that made them feel? That's the kind of distillation of changing cultures, because nobody would say in a toxic culture that the number one problem is communication.
No, no,
But usually it is.
that's good. Because I'm thinking about the one organization that I absolutely can say that I worked at that was hands down a toxic culture. And I think part of that, it was communication. It was, how people spoke to each other, how they resolved conflicts, or not even how they resolved conflicts, how they engaged in conflicts and never worked to resolve the conflict. And so there was a lot of energy, pent up energy, a lack of collaboration, responsibility, accountability. All of that goes back to relationships and how to communicate with each other. And it just became perverse throughout the entire organization, where it was just kind of wild being in that space
Yeah.
and you're continuously in this conflict, all day long.
Right.
So great for that. So speaking of that, what's your advice for leaders who are in a major crisis, whatever that crisis may be? They found themselves for some reason in a major crisis. Now, perhaps that crisis is internal, perhaps it has gone external as well. But they know they're in a crisis and they absolutely need to do something. And maybe they have no
Yes.
idea what that something is.
That is a very broad question. But I think one of my observations is that the most important thing in a crisis is who you decide to call.
Mm.
Call someone, but probably not your mum, probably not your husband, probably not your ex-boss. You need to know when you need to call in a professional. And I think, um, look, there's so many different types of corporate situations, right? There's the disgruntled Gen Z employee who's gone wild on LinkedIn and is threatening the company's brand. There's a cybersecurity incident where all of your customers' data is falling away. There's a situation where the CFO has run off with $8 million of the firm's money. Or there's a situation like the Coldplay Kiss Cam scandal where you suddenly lose two of your C-suite members overnight, right?
Right.
So a response to a crisis has to be proportionate. And there are two different types of comms. Obviously, there's internal comms and there's external comms. And for internal comms, you need to give as much information as you can because your people are your greatest asset. And you need to be able to steady the ship to say, oh, it's so much worse than you think that it possibly could be. But you know what? We're on top of it. And here are all the steps that we're taking to be able to move forwards. How are you going to do that without advice? I don't know. External comms is more sensitive and more specific to the situation. But again, showing confidence that you know what has happened, you know what you're doing about it, and you know what you're going to do to repair it. Everybody loves it when there is a playbook for the sequence of next steps. And so basically, as militant as you can be about creating a plan so that every single message is going to the correct stakeholder, to buy you time to center yourself, to have your own little freak out in the bathroom whilst you say, this is so much, I can't believe that this has happened on my watch, or, whatever it is that has transpired. But I think the other thing is, you've got to back yourself, right? You're a leader in an organization. You have a career of experiences that nobody else has, and you need to show up as you in that situation, whatever that looks like. You need to try and be the best version of yourself in that situation because that's what you've been hired to be. And so if you are a leader and you haven't yet faced a crisis, I'm very jealous. Uh, do everything that you can to get prepared because one will eventually come. So whether that's engaging in further coaching, law firms particularly, they do these phenomenal crisis scenarios where you'll get to work through case studies and you'll get to see in real time, okay, what does the board need to do? Or when do I need to have a really small circle of trust? Or when should I, in what circumstances am I actually not allowed to say anything? Because that will empower you so that when the crisis comes, you know what you can do. And that's why I always say that it's so important to sort relationships with people before you're in a difficult situation, because you need to know who you can trust before you get there.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that you're saying that you need to begin to prepare now. It's going to happen. Recently, here, there's a pastor, and this pastor, and we're seeing a number of things, but just this is coming to mind for me. This pastor who has a strong reputation. I mean, he has built a solid reputation for 30 plus years. And he is now in the middle of a crisis. And it's because of how he responded to a decision that he made. And his decision was to let someone go, a leader, a new leader of his team, his church.
Mhm, mhm.
But with that, he gave no information as to what happened. And so going back to your point that, you need to share and kind of over communicate with people. He literally just said, this person is gone and trust me. And people are now questioning, like, what else could it be? And they're telling
Yeah.
these stories. And so it's growing and it's getting legs. And I can understand why he would want to, thinking that, hey, I built this solid reputation for 30 plus years. You should be able to trust me. I don't have to give any more information than that. And he literally kind of said something like that, like, hey, I'm not going to give any more information than what I should share, which was that he's no longer here. We need to pray for him. You need to trust me. That's it.
You see, it's so interesting because by taking that very action, it undermined all of the trust and credibility that he had up until that point. About a
Exactly.
year ago, I think about a year ago, I heard of a similar situation at another church. And actually, the leadership team dealt with it so well because they were like, we made an error in judgment and we thought that this was going to be fine and we didn't see these issues coming far off. Now, as it happened, I saw the issues coming off and they were like, if you ever see this again, let us know. And I was like, yeah,
Right.
sure. But they exercised humility and they owned their decision. And the way that they owned their decision meant that actually they could really graciously not disclose the situation because they said, it is not for your ears. The people who need to know about it, they know about it. And if we were at liberty to be able to tell you more, we would tell you more, but it is not appropriate. And we need to respect the privacy of the individual at that time. And, I've never seen a potential scandal get squashed so effectively, so graciously, bravely, carefully, consistently, like no gossip. And, the family was cared for. And I just thought the thing again about a crisis is it evokes fear. And in a situation of fear, we act out of insecurity, which is pride, which is the antithesis of what you need to demonstrate in a crisis. And even if you're not wrong, you could be wrong. And therefore, having a communication style that doesn't jump to blame, we are in this together. This is not a good situation. I am doing my best to move this situation forwards. I might not get it right, but I would love your buy-in. And if you have any concerns about the way that I'm dealing with this, please let me know. But I'm doing the best that I can under the Lord's lordship and, with the advisors that I have around me. And we'll revisit this when we've all had a chance to heal. What a difference that would have made in that situation. And so I think
Absolutely.
he can go to coaching. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Speaking of coaching, do you coach clients?
I do. I was doing a mediation again about 6 months ago, and it was a challenging mediation between a leader and their team. And this went on for days, weeks, whatever. And the feedback that I got from the leader was, Leah, you're irritatingly perceptive. I said, oh, I'll take that as a compliment.
That is a great
But
compliment.
I need you as my coach. I was like, I don't do coaching. She was like, well, but I need you. I mean, okay, great. So yes, I do. I do coaching. I do mentoring. I think it's important to be able to, where I can, help people move on to the next step. And again, in their endeavors to be the best version of themselves, whether that is finding confidence. I work with people who have been harmed by their organization, which has affected their confidence, which has caused them to question their career history, that has caused them to, I think, often have something dislodged from their earlier life to realize that actually the healing that is required goes a lot deeper than just changing roles. And so I think helping people understand themselves better from a perspective of I'm not here to do it for you, but I will absolutely empower you to get out of your own way.
Love that. Thank you. Leah, you've been absolutely fascinating today. You've given us, I mean, so many gems and jewels that we can take with us as we move forward in our relationships, build stronger relationships in our personal life as well as our professional life. Anything you want to leave with our listeners?
I think for me, conflict doesn't have to be something that we run a million miles away from. I think if I could give you one tip about dealing with conflict, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Do your breathing exercises
Hmm.
before you start to go into a situation. Just center yourself and give yourself space and give yourself grace. Because not only do you deserve it, I know that sounds very woo woo, but it will transform the way that you show up in that conversation. And even if it's 10 seconds or 2 minutes, you will start to know the difference because you've given yourself additional capacity to walk into something that you've given yourself permission to find difficult. And I guarantee that you will find that it goes better than you think that it will.
Wow. Thank you for that. Guys, it's been absolutely amazing. Leah Brown. Leah, thank you, thank you, thank you. You've been absolutely fascinating today. You've given us a wealth of information. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to be dropping the link in the show notes. And so grab the link, go check out Leah Brown. She's a problem solver who's helping us to navigate our conflicts. Check out the link and invite her to speak to your organization. You don't lead like everyone else, so your resources shouldn't look like everyone else's. I created the Game Changer Leadership Collection for high impact leaders like you, visionaries, change agents, decision makers who lead with intention and influence. This free high impact resource pulls from my leadership arsenal and delivers immediate actionable insights you can use right now to elevate your influence, lead with conviction, and drive lasting transformation. It's not just a toolkit, it's your first step toward leading at the level you were born for. Let me show you what's inside. The Leadership Edge Sampler. It's a preview of my 10 daily power skills to sharpen your influence and impact. The Influence Language Mini Guide. Essential phrases to increase your authority and build trust in every room you walk into. The Leadership Blind Spot Snapshot. Because the greatest risk are the ones we don't see. The power of one visual aid. A reminder that even one decision, one tone, or one conversation can shift a team or stall a movement. The Executive Briefing Checklist, a go to tool for high stakes communication that drives clarity and alignment. The 5-minute accountability brief, a no fluff framework to build a culture of ownership fast. And we have the Game Changer Ascension Model Overview, my proprietary leadership growth map to help you scale your influence with intention. These are the very same tools I use with executives, culture shapers, and elite teams, leaders who know what's at stake and aren't here to play small. Because when you're called to shift systems, influence nations, and build legacies, you can't afford to lead on autopilot. This is where your next level begins. Download the Game Changer Leadership Collection today. It's free, it's strategic, and it's built for leaders who are born to shift the game. I'm Dr. Sharalyn Payne, and this is your Leadership Edge. Thank you for joining me on the Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn, where we don't follow trends, we set them, and we don't just lead teams, we shift legacies. If today's message challenged, stretched, or inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, tag it, lead through it, because real leaders don't just consume wisdom, they multiply it. Want to go deeper? Subscribe to the Ultra Influential newsletter for exclusive tools, behind-the-scenes strategy, and weekly mindset shifts for the leader ready to move nations, markets, and minds. Visit www.smpistrategies.com or send a note to leadership@smpistrategies.com. And if you're ready for next level coaching or consulting that positions you as the right leader at the right time in the right place, let's talk. This is what we do, and we do it with precision, power, and purpose. Remember, change isn't just something you lead, it's something you become. Stay bold, stay brilliant, stay a game changer.